Hello and welcome to Firearm Freedom. This is going to be another First Impressions video. In today's First Impressions video, we are taking a look at this O'Reilly Defense RAK-74p rifle. Before we get this video started, there are links down in the description where you can support the channel. We now have awesome Firearm Freedom merch shirts that just dropped. You guys are going to love those shirts, so check them out. It's the first link in the description. And if you're looking to not miss out on this content, from the best that I can see, the way to not miss out is if you comment down below, like the videos. Subscribing doesn't really do much, but it appears that if you do that interaction, it pops these videos back in your feed a little bit more. And I greatly appreciate the support. This is a review that, man, is a long time in the making. I have been waiting to get this rifle for review now for over a year. And that just kind of goes to show the state of the US AK-74 market and really the AK-74 market as a whole. Now, I'm going to say a lot of things about this Riley Defense rifle and also Riley Defense as a company that I think a lot of you guys might find helpful. But as always, before we get started, full disclosure, what is my relationship with Riley Defense? So as you guys heard me say, I waited over a year for this rifle on the review program, so they definitely do not get a little bit of a cherry-picked lead time there for reviewers. I still waited just as long as everybody else did to get this stuff in for review, and I also still paid for this rifle up front. They basically just gave me a small discount for the review to help out with, obviously, additional costs, ammo, stuff like that. But overall, I paid for this rifle, I waited the wait, and I really was excited to see how this rifle performed. Riley wasn't saying, hey, you need to do a positive review or anything like that. They just want to see how this rifle is performing and if there are any changes that need to be made. The RAK-74p variation is the variation that you guys see here that has a non-folding polymer stock, a polymer pistol grip, and of course a polymer handguard set. And they do have the 74 in multiple variations on their website, including triangle side folding stocks and also fixed teak wood stock sets and a few other options as well. Quite frankly, the only reason why I got this when I did is because it was a blem rifle that they had set aside because they weren't happy with the finish. They were going to put it in the blem pile, and that is it. So they have had, direct from Riley, what I'm hearing is a hell of a time finding parts for the 545 builds, and I have been seeing that across the board for all of these companies. So that is why you really don't see a lot of these Riley 74s in the wild that often these days. Now, the blem that is on this rifle is right here, and you guys probably are not even going to be able to tell that much on camera. I don't necessarily know what that blem was. It was either somebody like ran over the receiver or something like that and cracked it and they had to re-weld and like buff it out, or it was something weird when it came to the finish on the rifle, or somebody hit the grinding wheel on it. I don't know. Something was done there, but quite frankly, it does not hurt the functioning of the gun at all. And when they said, hey, we got a blem, if you want this, you can go with it. If not, it's going to be a while. I was like, you know what, screw it, let's get the blem and see what the deal is. I also kind of like the fact that they gave me a blem because, again, they didn't cherry pick this at all for the review. They just had it laying there and I decided to go with it. Overall, first impressions of the Riley 74 out of box, how's everything looking? Well, as far as the rivets, that all looks good to go. No problems there. There were no rivets that were looking strange or out of the ordinary. It does have a scope mount rail here on the side, and this, generally, these rivets are supposed to be turned around the other way. This is kind of the faster and easier way to rivet a scope mount, and sometimes these rivets being in this direction on the scope mount can lead to issues of your mount of choice actually grinding on that, and you got to kind of file them down. I learned that from my good friend, an AK expert, and he was able to kind of show me the difference in some of his builds that he has done. So in this case, again, not an issue per se, and I would imagine they are doing this a lot more nowadays to help getting these rifles out because they are so backlogged. As far as the Polymer Furniture Set, I'll be honest with you guys, most US-made Polymer AK furniture is absolute trash. I don't know why. We just can't seem to really make it in a way that it feels like it's not going to just break. But this is most definitely a better furniture set than the one that Century puts on their Wasser builds and other builds right now that have the Polymer Furniture Set. That set is absolute garbage. There is no heat shields in the handguard. That just burns up. The stock is at a really weird angle where you can't even get your iron sights. This is a much better set. As far as the pistol grip out of box, they give you kind of this improved pistol grip from the standard Comblock style, and it's actually not terrible. I think this pistol grip would actually be perfect if it was a little bit larger. Shout out to Goon Tape. I, of course, wrap the pistol grip in Goon Tape, and that just adds a little bit of traction. I typically do that on these slick pistol grips out of box, and it really does aid a little bit at the range. This is going to be switched out in the near future. I'm just very particular about my AK grips, and I like them to be just a little bit larger than this grip here. On the Rileys, you'll also get a ribbed dust cover for her pleasure, and then you will get an extended safety here that some people like, some people don't like. I know a lot of the AK guys out there, the real purists, don't like this because it's a little bit easier to go ahead and ND the gun accidentally. But if you can manage to operate this properly and watch your trigger finger, it is a much faster safety out of box. Now, with this one in particular, it was pretty loose and still is pretty loose, but it still has a good amount of tension to stop in the places that it needs to stop in. Another thing out of box you're going to get with the RAK-74 is a cleaning rod. I dig that quite a bit. Hate when companies don't include the cleaning rod, or worse off, don't even allow you a spot for a bayonet lug and also a spot to put the cleaning rod through. That just kills the look of a good AK to me, and I do like when they include it. As far as the finish of the Riley, typically, and guys, I've been seeing and selling Riley Defense AKs since they started coming out at different gun shops that I've worked at, and quite frankly, since they've started coming out, they're always a little bit hit or miss for finish. You'll see some machine marks here or there. When we start getting into the inside of this rifle, there's some tooling marks and stuff on the bolt carrier. There is some marks on the barrel, and that's kind of what you can expect with these rifles. I don't necessarily care about that at all because I care primarily about if the gun is made correctly and it runs reliably. Touching on Riley as a company and kind of the rocky road that they have had in the AK community. This is where I'm probably, I don't know, I haven't made the thumbnail yet, but I'm probably going to say somewhere on the thumbnail that this is a very underrated rifle and underrated company when it comes to US-made AKs. So I remember way back when Riley started putting out AKs on the market, and it was absolute trash. They were all cast parts. They were trying to go the route of Century at first, and that was when we still thought here in the US we could cut corners on AK parts and get a cheaper AK out to the public, and obviously that did not go well for Riley Defense, it didn't go well for PSA, and it didn't go well for Century, and it's still not going well for Century. But in the case of Riley, what ended up happening is that reputation really followed them even to this day, and it kind of drives me nuts when people, especially on Reddit threads and other things like that, just start regurgitating information that has not been validated for the current company. And I think that really needs to change because it's tough to find accurate information about these rifles. But from everything that I saw, getting Riley Defense AKs into the gun shop, Riley went back to the drawing board, started to forge all the important parts, bolt carrier, bolt, front trunnion, all the other additional parts are now forged instead of cast, and they just kind of reevaluated the rifle. Now, they still had hit or miss QC issues, but as far as the basic components of the rifle and the strength that needed to be there, they achieved that. They didn't pull what a lot of companies do now, which is like, oh, we're going to forge the front trunnion, but we're going to cast the bolt carrier, we're going to cast the bolt, or we're going to cast all these other pieces, but the front trunnion's forged. You still run into all the same issues. It just sounds a little bit better, and it doesn't matter what steel you're using. I appreciate a company like Riley going back to the drawing board, and like PSA going back to the drawing board when they get things wrong. After that, all the Riley Defense AKs that I sold at the gun shops that I worked at, I always had people coming back and telling me, hey man, this thing ran great, love it, few thousand rounds through it, no problems at all. And for the most part, that's kind of where I left it with Riley. I never bought one myself. I always saw them coming in, and I saw them pop out the 74s. And then I saw the AK Operators Union video on it where it went through the few thousand round tests. It did a great job in the Sand Tornado. And ultimately, I still just saw people shitting all over the rifle because of how it originally was. When it comes to the AK-74 market as a whole, there are almost no options left in the United States. The ammunition is now finally dwindling, and that's unfortunate, especially when it comes to reviews like this, like we'll talk about in a minute. And we, at the moment, have about two pseudo kind of reliable options when it comes to US-made 74s, which is the PSA and the Riley Defense. Those are the two options that we have. Yes, there's a few niche build companies out there that do them, but for the most part, these are the two mass-produced. There are no more, at the moment, imported 545s that are easily available and affordable to the common person. That is going to quickly kill this market for one of what I would consider my favorite rifle rounds and my favorite rifle as a whole. I love everything about 545 by 39. It is my favorite rifle caliber. It shoots so flat, it has devastation downrange, and it is just awesome through and through. So it kills me to see people just shitting all over the US-made 74 when, in reality, if Riley does not get it right, if PSA does not get it right, that's about it for this rifle and for this cartridge until another huge company starts taking it up and trying to make it right. So I really do hope they continue to make these, and I hope they continue to make improvements, because this may be the future of the 74 market, especially as build kits slowly die off and are incredibly hard to find. Rant complete, and I hope that helps some people out in trying to figure out if this rifle is legit or not legit. What I think also hurt the company as a whole is as we got into availability problems when it comes to parts for these rifles in the past few years, there has just not been that many of these rifles out there on the shelves. So at the same time, you don't see many reviews of this rifle out there in the YouTube sphere to kind of help people out, see if they're any better or worse or anything like that. When it comes to ammo for this review, I was only able to shoot 150 rounds, which quite frankly is not that much at all, and not enough for me to say if this gun is reliable or not. It shot 150 rounds no problem, but quite frankly, I'm reserving the other ammo for when I do upgrades to this rifle, which are coming very soon. I have most of the upgrades set aside. And yes, it will be slightly different than my other AKs. I'm not going Ultimac. I'm doing some different stuff, so that way we can kind of switch it up a little bit. But it fired those 150 rounds just fine. You guys will see more of a round count down the road, and at the moment, I'm not really going to comment as much on reliability because I don't think 150 rounds is enough to judge that. But that's just kind of the new reality of how much harder it's getting to find 545 out there in the wild to get for these reviews. When we take a look underneath the dust cover here, you guys can see as far as the overall machining on the bolt and bolt carrier and all that good stuff, it is rough. There's a lot of machine marks, but it is made properly, and I don't see any large chunks missing or anything like that. This is only after 150 rounds, so I really wouldn't expect too much. We got a little bit of wear starting in the parts that it should. We got a little bit of wear starting on the tail there of the bolt carrier group. Typically that work hardens, so again, nothing alarming about that right now. It all looks pretty good. When it comes to the inside of the receiver in the front trunnion area specifically, Typically with now US-made 74s, you really want to watch out for the shelf on the right-hand side of the trunnion where the bolt locks into place. I'm not seeing any stepping of the metal or anything like that. Again, I would not expect to see anything like that at this low of a round count, but we're looking pretty good. As far as how the rifle shot at the range, it shot incredibly well, and that's just goes for what you can expect for a 74. And aside from those small minor scratches and stuff like that, nothing is incredibly bent or looking off-centered. Everything looks pretty damn good. When it comes to the sight in, I did have to move the front sight. I had to adjust it ever so slightly to the left to get a good group on paper, and that was it. That was good to go. From standing in the shots that you guys are seeing where I'm doing 3-round groups at the target, I was at about 50 yards, I was getting about 1.5 inches from just standing from the shoulder, which I would say for irons, just right off the bat, for what the rifle can do out of box, is pretty freaking good. In the future, we're going to be putting optics on this, seeing what it is capable of. As far as the trigger out of box and how that felt in the way of how the gun shot at the range, really not bad. This, I'm not sure if this is just their trigger. Reminds me a lot of like a Tapco G2, but you got a little bit of take up, not too much. You're going to hit your brake right about there. Pretty light, pretty smooth. Reset right about there, right back out, and the creep again. This trigger was pretty solid. I was able to get some pretty fast mag dumps and strings of fire without issue, which you guys are going to be seeing in back roll, which was pretty cool. As far as the muzzle brake, you have a standard 24 mil AK-74 style muzzle brake. Not bad. I've heard a lot of complaints with whatever coating or paint they use on this having issues. I have not tried to clean this yet in order to see if this has a problem. However, I do have a Comblock 74 style Bulgarian brake that I am going to be throwing on this just because I just prefer the look of that brake. So this is going to be switched out anyways. As far as the gas tube, this was another complaint with a lot of people that it was kind of off center or had other issues like that. This one is lined up pretty good, no problems there, and it does have some, you know, some little like chatter, machine marks, whatever, and that really doesn't bother me at all. The lower handguard does have a heat shield, so that's a huge plus. Didn't get too hot at the range. Upper handguard does not have a heat shield, but not really a huge problem there, just plastic. You do have an enlarged mag release on the Rileys as well, and I didn't have any problems with that. It does help a little bit with reloads. As far as magazines, I did try of course, the Magpul 74 mag that came with the rifle out of box. That fit just fine. I had some AC Unity 74 mags, no problems at all here. And then, of course, some Bulgarian slab side Circle 10s. No problem with the Circle 10s either. So as far as mag fitment, everything was good, tight, not a lot of wobble. That is going to wrap up my first impressions video on the 74. I actually really like this rifle, and I'm pretty happy that I went with it. And I hope the reliability will prove itself as we continue to shoot this, and I am going to do some pretty cool upgrades to it, which I am excited about. So stay tuned for that. I'll be posting pictures of this, some videos, and all that good stuff on all the other social media accounts that Firearm Freedom has. If you guys have any other questions about this rifle or anything else on the channel, please throw them down below in the comment section, and you guys know I absolutely will get back to you. And be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to not miss out on any of the awesome content that's coming soon.